Tomoya Iki, Megumi Kato, Ariri Spencer Sawamura, Yutaha Kasumigayaka, and Tomoya's cousin Mikairu Hyoto go out location scouting for their project, which is a video game. As Ariri attempts to get Megumi to act out a scenario for the main heroine, Yutaha lures Tomoya away and asks him to act out a romantic scenario with her. However, her efforts are interrupted by a jealous Ariri, and as the two girls argue, Mikairu takes Tomoya to a lake and they play in the water. Later on, the group plays ping pong at their inn. The following night, Ariri, Yutaha, and Mikairu confront Tomoya and demand to know why he forced them to join the club and makes them do unreasonable tasks without repaying them. After being rescued by Megumi, he talks with her about her tendency to not stand out in the group. The two then express their hopes that their game will be enjoyed by the otaku community. 6 months prior to the location scouting trip, Tomoya meets Megumi after he retrieves her lost beret, which inspires him to begin development on a video game with her as the main heroine. A week later at school, he meets up with his friend Yoshihiko Kamigo, who tells him about Ariri, a well-known member of the school's art club who Yoshihiko has a crush on. Unable to recreate Megumi's exact image, Tomoya approaches Ariri and asks for her help in creating the art for the dating sim, since she is also a popular doujinshi writer and illustrator. Believing Tomoya isn't taking the subject too seriously because he is unable to even remember Megumi, Ariri turns down the offer. During lunch, Tomoya approaches Yutaha and asks for her assistance, as she is an increasingly popular novelist, but she also turns him down after noticing an absence of originality in his proposal. After school, Tomoya expands his proposal and goes to the AV room, where he promised a meeting between him, Ariri, and Yutaha. On the way there, he encounters Megumi, but he doesn't recognize her until she reminds him about how he returned her beret. Ariri and Yutaha meet up at the AV room, where they both engage in a bitter rivalry before realizing Tomoya isn't going to show up. Eventually, Ariri and Yutaha decide to accept Tomoya's proposal to create the video game. Tomoya then has dinner with Megumi at a coffee shop, where he notices that despite her cuteness, she has a lack of presence. When they talk about how coincidental their first meeting was, Megumi refers to herself as boring. At first, Tomoya is enraged at her statement, but realizes that she is right since she has no traits that would make her stick out of a crowd. The two are then joined by Ariri and Yutaha, both of whom take a look at Tomoya's expanded proposal and continue to express their disapproval of it. They encourage him to give up on the project, but he refuses. The next day, he invites Megumi over to his house, where he has her play a dating sim game in the hopes that she would understand the subject material. When she finishes the game, Megumi is pleased by the experience, but is still unable to understand the actual appeal of it. Tomoya is then forced to have her stay the night and play the game's sequel, which she agrees to do, much to his shock. By the time she finishes playing, morning has arrived, and in her drowsiness, she agrees to join Tomoya's circle, with Ariri and Yutaha continuing to turn down his revised drafts for the project. Tomoya is faced with a final deadline at the end of Golden Week. He tries inviting Megumi over to his house again, but finds that she is out of town on a family vacation that will last until the end of Golden Week. Ariri and Yutaha arrive separately at his house, with Ariri subtly motivating Tomoya and Yutaha encouraging him to give up, and that being a creator has its cons. Later on, he calls Megumi again and allows her to have fun on her vacation. She then asks him about how she was appealing to him, and he responds there is no room for improvement for her. He then tries continuing with his project, but is unable to make any progress and he contemplates giving up. Suddenly, Megumi arrives, dressed in the same attire she wore when they first met and exhibiting a new personality, and asks if this was what he envisioned of his heroine. When Tomoya is puzzled by her change in personality, she tells him that Ariri and Yutaha helped her before encouraging him to continue on with the project. Ariri and Yutaha watch the scenario unfold and admit that they will be involved in the project even if Tomoya is unable to finish by the deadline. Megumi is impressed after she finishes reading a light novel series written by Yutaha. Meanwhile, hoping to learn more about Yutaha's new book ahead of the rest of the public, Tomoya has a job interview with her and gets a job as a part-time editor, much to her displeasure. It is then revealed that Yutaha's series gained its popularity due to Tomoya featuring it on his well-known blog site. He spends much of the day writing an interview article, after which Yutaha offers her assistance on his project proposal, surprising him. Later on, Ariri decides to join in on the project as well. During a meeting between Tomoya, Ariri, and Yutaha in the AV room, Tomoya announces the production schedule and declares the release date to be during the Winter Comiket. However, because of the funding necessitated to further the project, Tomoya is forced to work a number of odd jobs. While working one of these jobs, he is shocked to see Megumi with another boy. Though it turns out the boy is just her visiting cousin, Keiichi, he chastises her for straying from the heroine formula and tells her not to see Keiichi for the time being. When Megumi tells him that she plans to go shopping with Keiichi, Tomoya asks her out, and she accepts. The circle activities begin, and Ariri experiences a difficulty in getting Megumi to display exaggerated emotions for inspiration for her sketches. When Megumi leaves to practice her expressions, Tomoya and Ariri talk about how emotionless she is and the challenge it presents for the game. Tomoya then asks Ariri on dating advice, as he and Megumi plan to go shopping the following weekend. At first, she gives it to him, but realizes his intentions and becomes enraged. Yutaha overhears the conversation and is further inspired to write the game's plot. The next day, she finishes, and while Tomoya is impressed by the final result, he asks for a better conclusion, which upsets Ariri, as she wants to finish development as soon as possible. Tomoya and Megumi then go shopping at the mall, with Tomoya becoming increasingly uncomfortable about interacting with what he views as regular people. Upon reaching the last store, Tomoya realizes Megumi is buying glasses for him as thanks for accompanying her. In a flashback, Yutaha meets Tomoya personally for the first time during a book signing. She becomes impressed with his knowledge of her books and eventually is enamored with him. In the present day, Tomoya misses their scheduled meeting, which upsets Yutaha. She then recalls an incident 6 months ago, during which she gave Tomoya an advanced copy of her final manuscript before its release, only for him to turn the responsibility down because she was only doing it to hear his feedback and not those of other fans. Later on, as a rainstorm approaches, she is surprised to see Tomoya running up to her in the rain. While allowing Tomoya to take a hot bath in a hotel room, Yutaha is shocked after realizing her manager ordered the room for the both of them for the night. After taking a shower herself, Yutaha has a conversation with Tomoya, who asks her for help in improving the game's plot. At first, she is upset by this, but changes her mind after he suggests keeping both storylines as game routes. After spending the entire night working out the plot, Yutaha leaves the room, but not before acknowledging Tomoya as a creator. The day before, Megumi and Ariri meet up at the mall after Tomoya leaves so that Ariri could draw a quick sketch. Ariri is pleased with her drawing, having unexpectedly upset Megumi when she reminded her that Tomoya abruptly ended their date to chase after Yutaha. With the deadline for the manuscript of their Dojin Circle drawing near, Ariri invites Tomoya to her house. There, she comes up with an idea how to push her creativity to the limits and the two engage in a role-play scenario. Thanks to their efforts, Ariri's work nears completion. At the school gate, Tomoya realizes Megumi changed her hairstyle, and he presses her for an explanation. Meanwhile, he meets Izumi, who is a childhood friend, an otaku, and a member of the Dojin Circle Fancy Wave. Tomoya reminisces with Izumi, who gives him a ticket to the Comiket and tells him that she wants him to come to her Dojin Circle. Additionally, she reveals to Tomoya that everything she has now is thanks to him. As Tomoya and Ariri walk home, they reunite with their old friend, Iori, who is the representative of the Dojin Circle Rouge en Rouge. Iori is looking for an illustrator, so he announces a challenge to Tomoya, in which both must prove whether they are the most qualified person to use Ariri as their group's illustrator. In Tomoya's room, while Ariri silently writes a manuscript, Tomoya and Ariri argue over some minor things regarding the deadline for submitting it. Afterwards, Megumi and Tomoya play video games, during which he praises her, saying that she has become a fine otaku. He asks whether Ariri will join Rouge en Rouge, but she tells him that she has decided to become his illustrator. On the day of the summer Comiket, Megumi is bewildered by the large crowd, but by following Tomoya, she manages to arrive at the Dojin Circle where Izumi is, and the two help with Izumi's circle activity. When Izumi talks about the Comiket, Tomoya is impressed with the quality of her works, since it has only been a year since she started. Tomoya concocts a plan, and when Izumi talks with Megumi, he starts carrying it out. Thanks to Tomoya's cooperation, Izumi's Dojin Circle has an increase in its sales and is extremely well received, which makes a positive impression on Izumi. When the Comiket is over and Tomoya leaves, he meets Ariri, who has Izumi's Circle's book. She tells Tomoya with teary eyes that she is no longer loved by him, and then runs away. Tomoya abruptly wakes in his bed and notices that there is a woman sleeping alongside him. He realizes that it is Yutaha, who was invited to his house by Megumi. When the three of them discuss why Ariri got angry, Yutaha tells Tomoya that Ariri has lost her pride as a creator, and that she subsequently lost her footing as Tomoya's childhood friend. She provides him with advice on how to reconcile with Ariri. Afterwards, Tomoya goes to the Comiket, where he meets Iori and asks him to help him get Ariri back to his circle. At night, against the dark sky, lit with fireworks that erupt over Ariri's house, Tomoya appears in her garden and cries out to her in accordance with Yutaha's plan, and then takes her to the elementary school they used to attend. Ariri begins to cry and tells Tomoya that she is not as important to him as Izumi, who got to know him recently. He reveals to Ariri that he had blamed her for breaking off contact with him and making new friends. Afterwards, she pledges to become Tomoya's number one, and then Tomoya carries her home on his back. In Tomoya's room, Ariri makes a new circle cut and delivers it to the circle's members. Tomoya, Ariri, Utaha, and Megumi hold a video conference in regards to producing a game, and afterwards, Tomoya heads off to take a bath. On his way there, he bumps into a girl and realizes she is his cousin, Mikairu. Mikairu tells Tomoya that she ran away from home after a fight with her father over her membership in a band. After school, in the club room, Tomoya is contacted by Mikairu, after which Utaha attacks him with questions about his relationship with Mikairu. Tomoya goes home and is shocked to discover his otaku goods dumped in the garbage by Mikairu. He confronts her about it, but she orders him to cease acting like an otaku and to think about his future. After the two talk about her band activity and his otaku activities, Tomoya gets in the bath, and while he is bathing, he hears Mikairu playing music. Her music touches Tomoya's heart, invoking mental imagery of a cutscene from a game. Afterwards, he decides to introduce Mikairu to his game circle. Tomoya introduces Mikairu to the girls, stating that he wants Mikairu to do the background music for the game. Mikairu, however, voices her dislike of anything otaku related. Utaha and Mikairu argue over the difference in their views, while Ariri is traumatized because her childhood friend status has been overshadowed by Mikairu, who has known Tomoya her whole life. Tomoya continues to persuade Mikairu, but Mikairu instead wants to focus on her band and find a manager for her band in order to win her father's approval. Mikairu wants Tomoya to be her band manager, using it as an excuse to make him quit his otaku lifestyle, as well as stating that the other girls are not as passionate in game making as he is. Meanwhile, Megumi helps Ariri and Utaha to work on the game because they are 1 week behind schedule. Megumi later shows Tomoya the changes she made, and also, in revenge for his overreaction to her relationship with her cousin Keiichi, teases Tomoya's close relationship with Mikairu. They both agree on the effect Mikairu's music brings to the game. Tomoya agrees to be Mikairu's band manager, setting up a first live show for the band in the process. Tomoya briefs Mikairu's band, Icy Tail, on their first gig, stating that they are warming up for other bands since they don't have a fanbase yet. Meanwhile, Utaha and Ariri accompany Megumi to offer support for Mikairu's band, despite being upset that Tomoya became the band manager without consulting them first. Tomoya explains that Icy Tail has always been playing covers of anime songs, revealing the fact that the other members of the band are actually otakus. He convinces Mikairu to join his circle, with the approval of her bandmates. Icy Tail's debut is well received, with Mikairu performing her own original song at the end. Meanwhile, Ariri and Megumi become close friends and Utaha finishes writing the first route of the game's scenario. Tomoya and the girls take a look at the completed first route in his room, and continue to work on the other routes with 2 months left until the winter comic. Like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video and comment down below if I should recap season 2 or another anime.